Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. We are returning back to our 5th Oathbreaker build, and to refresh the memories of the MTG Burgeoning community, you selected Oko, Thief of Crowns, for the channel's 5th Oathbreaker deck, and in today's video, we will reveal your selection for Oko's signature spell, and we begin installing the components to the 58 card deck. What's up, MTG BC? That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Here we are with the channel's 5th Oathbreaker. It is Oko, Thief of Crowns. That's what the community selected, and that's who's going to anchor our 5th Oathbreaker deck. The signature spell, also selected by the community, is Simic Charm. It is our green-blue instant charm that gives us 3 modes from which to choose. Pick one of the following. Target creature gets +3/+3 till end of turn. Permanents we control gain hexproof until end of turn. Or return target creature to its owner's hand. So this can help us with some combat chicanery with the +3/+3. This can help protect Oko from any spot removal spells. And we can also bounce a creature to its owner's hand if someone is coming after Oko and we have no blockers or other spells. In order to interact with that creature, we can just use our Simic Charm to bounce that creature to their owner's hand. Or, if needed, we can bounce one of our own creatures to our hand. So, the community has selected Simic Charm, and now it is time to begin filling the 58. As Oko's just a tricky fellow creating food tokens and then having all abilities of a target artifact or creature and becoming a green elk that's just 3/3, we're going to continue with that trend throughout this deck. So the first portion of this deck is going to be filled with spells that are going to, let's say, nerf our opponent's creature. That was a lot easier to say in my head than it was out loud. All right, so let's begin with an instant called Oathbreaker. 1 and a blue. Target creature loses all abilities and becomes 0/1 until end of turn. And just so that we don't have to continuously reference exactly what Oko is going to do with each of these spells, just keep in mind what the big bang of Oko is, which we can do the moment he hits the battlefield. We can exchange control of target artifact or creature we control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. So conceivably, we could swap a food token and, let's say, I don't know, maybe an Eldrazi that became 0/1 and lost all abilities till end of turn, and we can give to our opponents a nice hefty food token for their wonderful Eldrazi, all for the cost of 1 and a blue, thanks to Oathbreaker. So let's keep that big bang ability in mind as we continue with the next portion of this deck. So Oathbreaker is card number 1 in this Oko Oathbreaker build. Next up, we have card number 2, which is very similar to Oathbreaker, just with a different name, and it's Turn to Frog. It's a 1 and blue, so the mana value is the same, and it's also an instant, and it says, until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and becomes a blue frog with base power and toughness 1/1. So that's a pretty nice Blightsteel Colossus you have there. Let's turn it into a 1/1 with no abilities, and we'll give you a food token for it. Turn to Frog is spell number 2 in the deck's 58. Next up, we're going to shift gears, moving away from instants, moving to auras, and this time we're going to talk about Kasmina's Transmutation. For the same mana value as the previous 2 spells, we're looking at 1 and a blue, but this is an enchant creature. An enchanted creature loses all abilities and has base power toughness 1/1. So instead of the surprise of an instant, we can put this on one of our opponents and just have it sit there on the battlefield until Oko's ready to make the swap. Kasmina's Transmutation is spell number 3. Next up, and Well, continuing the trend, we have another aura, and this one is called Frogify. 1 in a blue, enchant creature, and it says enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a blue frog creature with base power and toughness 1/1. So again, we can just play the slow game and wait for Oko to come into play to swap out a food or something else with this frogified creature, or we can just completely nerf one of our opponent's most important and or powerful creatures. Frogify is spell number 4. Continuing the trend of auras with a mana value of 2, we have 1 in a green, we have Kenrith's Transformation. When this one ETBs, we get to draw a card. So that kind of helps offset the fact that we're going to turn the creature into a 3/3 as opposed to a 1/1 or 0/1 that we saw with the previous 4 spells. So Kenrith's Transformation says enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. So we still shouldn't have any trouble using Oko's ability to swap out something that we have for something so much better of an opponent's. All right, that's Kenrith's Transformation. Next up, we're going to kick the mana value up to 1 with a 2 and a blue, but we're staying with our auras, and we're going to show Imprisoned in the Moon. We use this to enchant a creature, a land, or a planeswalker. An enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap, add a colorless mana to your mana pool, and loses all other card types and abilities. So we have the ability to nerf one of our opponent's Oathbreakers. And including Imprisoned in the Moon, although it's 2 and a blue, the additional versatility of reaching a land and planeswalker in addition to the creature is definitely worth paying an extra mana for that spell. All right, another aura, again with a mana value of 2 and a blue. We have, Ichthyomorphosis. Ichthyomorphosis says enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a blue fish with base power and toughness 0/1. So again, it's another aura with a mana value of 3 that helps to bring down and nullify, neutralize, any one of those will be fine, one of our opponent's creatures. All right, going away from the auras for a moment, going back to where it all began with our instance, and one of the options for the signature spell that the community decided not to select, we have Polymorphist's Jest for 1 and 2 blue. It reads until end of turn. Each creature target player controls loses all abilities and becomes a blue frog with base power and toughness 1/1. So this could affect an opponent's entire army, thereby maybe keeping Oko alive if we have not enough blockers or interactions to stave off a lethal attack, or enough to protect our own life total. More importantly, however, this gives us more reach with using Oko's Big Bang ability in order to pick any creature we so desire, particularly if any of those creatures have hexproof or shroud. Polymorphist's Jest is a way in which to dance around protection, shroud, hexproof, all of those things that would prevent any of the preceding spells from targeting it. All right, last spell for this crop of cards, and that's going to be in the form of a creature called Cryptoplasm. It's 1 and 2 blue, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we may have Cryptoplasm become a copy of another target creature. If we do, Cryptoplasm gains this ability. So this is kind of like a clone that triggers at the beginning of our upkeep. So we can continuously swap out creatures and make the Cryptoplasm become something very, very, let's say, bunk, that would help to satisfy Oko's exchange of giving some creature to one of our opponents in exchange for something so much better. So Cryptoplasm is one of those spells that we're going to include in this deck, and we're going to drop that one right here. All right, so there we have it. All right, next crop of spells. Now, actually, this is supposed to go with the next crop of spells, so that got misplaced. So Cryptoplasm is there. So a nice little preface before we begin with the final round of spells that we're going to add today. A nice little note for us to keep in mind. When we are playing any spells that have clone effects, such as Cryptoplasm, and many, many of the other spells that you are about to see, When we target one of the creatures of our opponents, let's say, for example, it has Frogify or Kenrith's Transformation on there. Is it Transformation or Transmutation? Transformation. Kenrith's Transformation. So let's say, for all intents and purposes, we just use the example of the Blightsteel Colossus. Blightsteel Colossus has a Frogify on it, making it a 1/1 frog with no abilities. We have Cryptoplasm in play. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can choose that Blightsteel Colossus, and the Cryptoplasm will become a copy of the card's original identity. It will not be a 1/1 frog that's just a vanilla creature. It will become an 11/11 trampling infector. That's a wonderful little nuance that we're going to weave into this deck to make Oko completely broken, because we're going to nullify all of the creatures that our opponents control, all of their biggest, baddest, mightiest, most powerful creatures, shrinking them down to 0/1, 1/1s, 3/3s with no abilities, and then we are going to cast numerous clone effects that will clone the original identity of those cards, but not the 0/1 or 1/1. So that's how our deck is going to win the day. Cryptoplasm is one of those spells. Another one is going to be Phyrexian Metamorph. For 3 colorless mana and 1 Phyrexian mana, which is either an island or 2 life, we may have Phyrexian Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So let's say we have Kozilek out there, the Butcher of Truth, the old 12/12 Annihilator 4, and let's just say we decide to turn him to Frog. Let's say we have one of our auras slapped on him, let's just say we have Imprisoned in the Moon slapped on a Kozilek Butcher of Truth. We cast Phyrexian Metamorph, it comes into play, we target Kozilek, we get an original copy of Kozilek. We don't get the we don't get the neutered or nerfed abilities of any of our auras. We get to copy the original identity of the card. Our opponents lose out, and we gain a copy of it. This is a nice way in which to weave in an additional win condition if for some reason Oko, let's be honest, gets sent to the command zone one too many times. So let's continue with our clone effects and how we're going to ruin the days of our opponents. Next up, we have Spark Double. So we can have Spark Double come into play as a copy of a creature or planeswalker we control. How would you like to have 2 Okos out there at the same time? If it's a creature, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. If it's a planeswalker, it gets a loyalty counter on it. And if the permanent is legendary, it's not legendary. 3 and a blue, Spark Double for 2 Okos, or again, any one of our opponent's creatures that just lost it and it's not as powerful under their control, but they will be when we make a copy of it. Next up, another clone effect, we have Stunt Double. 3 and a blue, just like Spark Double, but this has Flash. And when it ETBs, it ETBs as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. Again, we're targeting our opponent's creatures. They're going to get knocked down in power and abilities, and we're just going to copy what they used to be. Next up, we have the original clone. 3 and a blue, we may have clone enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. Notice that for all of our clone effects, we are making sure that the effect says any creature on the battlefield, because we don't want to be targeting any of our creatures, because we're only going to have a couple of true beaters that are going to be included as a way in which to diversify our set of win conditions. Next up, sticking with a mana value of 4, we have 2 and 2 blue, we have Vizier of Many Faces. And when it enters the battlefield, it enters as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except if Vizier of Many Faces was embalmed. The token has no mana cost, it's white, and it's a zombie in addition to its other types. So we get to use Vizier of Many Faces a second time by casting the Embalm ability, 3 and 2 blue, from our graveyard. So that's 2 for the price of 1, all on 1 card. Thank you, Vizier of Many Faces. All right, we've got just a few cards left. Next up, and this is going to round out the last of our clone effects. And that's going to be a copy of Altered Ego. It's X. Come on, camera, get in the game. what the? There we go. It's X, 2 green and a blue, and it can't be countered, so that's going to be nice for all of our control mages that we're going to see at the Oathbreaker table. We may have Alter Ego enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it enters with an X additional +1/+1 counters. So we get to either just tap the standard mana value of 4 in order to clone a creature, or we can inflate the power and toughness by filling X with a bunch of additional mana. Altered Ego could be one of our sneaky win conditions in this deck. So as we pause and take a break, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7 clone effects, and then we have 3, 6, and we have 8. Count them, 8 different spells that will allow our opponents to have their creatures be reduced in power and toughness with the loss of abilities. Some of them just for a turn, but many others for the life that the aura enchants them. So this is what Oko is going to do. Oko is going to come down. Its big bang is 5, so we're going to need to make sure we spend a little bit of time to build him up so that we can start swiping these creatures. I may have made the mistake of saying he could do his big bang right away as soon as he came into play. I think I said that earlier, and that is a mistake. It costs 5 loyalty counters for Oko to do that. So he comes down, and most likely he's going to +2 to add 2 loyalty counters to get to 6. And we're going to swap that food token next turn by taking off 5 counters. And hopefully the choicest, biggest, just juiciest, nicest creature that's been nerfed. And we're just going to take that creature away, and then we're going to work our way doing whatever we need to do. And if that doesn't happen through the use of our instant spells here, then we have the option of it being auras. And then we'll have some other ways in which to, get rid of the auras. But of course, we always have the option of just cloning the creatures that have the auras on there that are bringing their power and toughness down to 1/1. All right, very good. So, again, with the idea that Oko may spend a lot of time in the command zone because he's going to be the focal point of all of our opponent's removal spells, we're going to add a couple other cards into the deck that will help us achieve the goal of swapping out permanents. The first is going to be Daring Thief. It's 2 and a blue. It's a human rogue, and it has the Inspired mechanic, which reads, whenever Daring Thief becomes untapped, we may exchange control of target non-land permanent we control and target permanent an opponent controls that shares a card type with it. So this is a way in which we can swap out some creatures by giving one of our opponents, I don't know, maybe something like a Birds of Paradise or a Gilded Goose in exchange for, I don't know, maybe an Eldrazi, maybe a dragon, maybe something that's a lot more powerful than just a little mana dork. So Daring Thief will help us to do what Oko wants to do, even if Oko is a spectator in the command zone. And the last card we're going to add for this installment of this current deck building series is going to be 1 copy, of course, of Willbreaker, 3 and 2 blue, again with a 2/3 body, and whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes the target of a spell or ability we control, gain control of that creature for as long as we control Willbreaker. So with Willbreaker in play, if we cast an Oathbreaker on one of our opponent's creatures, we're going to take that creature. Sure, it's only going to be 0/1 with no abilities, but that's only until the end of turn, and as long as we continue to maintain control of Willbreaker, whatever creature we Oathbreaker is going to be under our control for the rest of the game. Same thing if we use Turn to Frog. Same thing if we use... Oh, actually, we can't do that with Polymorphous just because it doesn't target any of the creatures. So Willbreaker, similar to Daring Thief, is going to allow us to gain control of our opponent's creatures, even if Oko is not allowed to do so. And there you have it, folks. We have gone through a number of transformation spells, a number of clone effects, some swapping spells. We are going to try to make this Oko deck one that our opponents will not like to play. We're trying to break Oko and Oathbreaker. Broko? I don't know if that one's going to work. You guys let me know in the comment section below how that name sounds to you. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.